monitoring the Facebook Live on my phone, but there's a lag, so it's really weird. Like I keep looking down and it's like something I just did.
Oh, it's a little behind. Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
Only
No
by a few
problem.
seconds, but it's just really weird to see.
Cool. Well, we'll get started. We want to welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is your official Zoom program brought to you by SPJ Florida called So You're a Journalist and You Want to Start a Podcast. So even if you're not a journalist, we welcome you. Of course, our fellow colleagues in journalism, thank you for joining us. And of course, we want to spark some ideas for you and some conversation about what it will mean if you are thinking about starting a podcast, and hopefully we'll have some helpful tips for you. So while we're letting some more guests join our conversation here, we want to first of all let you know that this program is brought to you by SPJ Florida. And hopefully this is not the first time you're hearing about SPJ Florida, especially if you're a journalist in Florida. Both Lindsey and myself, and we'll introduce ourselves momentarily, are members of the board, and we thought it would be a good idea to kind of share our experiences with podcasting. So here we are again. We are not the end-all be-all authorities on this subject, of course, but we thought we'd at least start the conversation with each of you and hopefully answer some questions if we can help our fellow journalists along their podcast journey. So if you don't know about SPJ Florida, please check out our website. It's a great organization that is here supporting journalists, of course, advocating for journalists. We do everything from programs to help you improve your skills, to help us improve our skills. Of course, we give out scholarships as well. And of course, we advocate for folks within the journalism community. And there are so many different things we have going on, and we cover all of Florida. So I'm in Miami representing for South Florida. Lindsey's all the way on the other side of the state, up in Jacksonville. But we do programs all over the state. And of course, we're doing a lot via Zoom now. So for a small yearly membership, we hope that we can serve our colleagues and do things that hopefully improve their lives and help them forward their careers. So please do check us out. One more announcement before we get started. Our annual Sunshine State Awards, yes, is coming up next week, in fact. So we'd like to invite all of you. It's August 15th. Please check out our website for tickets. And we're going to have some fun. It's going to be via Zoom, so you don't have to go anywhere. Just wear a nice top. We don't care what's on the bottom. And we're going to have a great time recognizing our fellow journalists and hopefully letting you know what's going on in the industry. And well, it'll be fun. We're going to have some surprises, I was going to add. So make sure you check us out. Don't miss this on August 15th, the 2020 SPJ Sunshine State Awards. So without further ado, we're here to talk podcasting. I've been doing some of the talking, but I'm going to introduce myself now. My name is Suzette Speaks. I am a multimedia journalist and television host in Miami, as I said before. And I'm a newly minted podcaster. I have been podcasting this summer since the COVID-19 pandemic started, and it's been an interesting journey. So it's been fun. I've learned a lot, and of course I have a lot more to learn, but I thought it'd be fun to come alongside this lovely lady and share some of our experiences. And you find out, again, we'll learn from you as we are going to talk a little bit more about what we do. And over to you, Lindsey.
Yeah, so my name is Lindsey Kilbride, and I work for WJCT Public Media, which is the Northeast Florida NPR member station. So I've been doing public radio for a little over 5-6 years or so. I guess longer than that if you count internships in public radio. But I was a reporter for a long time, turning daily radio stories, and now I'm the special projects producer. So far I've produced 4 podcasts, and that's sort of the main thing I do now is long form journalism and kind of making that into audio. But I've done lots of different styles. I did a long form narrative called Oddball, which is like this really weird, it's a kind of a mystery investigation in my hometown about a maybe UFO. And then I've done a music history podcast with a local magazine, so kind of like helping someone else make a podcast. We've done a climate change podcast, and we've also done a really cool storytelling podcast. So between, sit down interviews to like really being out in the field and gathering a lot of audio out there, I've done a lot of that. So that's kind of my background here.
And you can jump in with Lindsey. I don't want to be the only one talking. Why did you and I think this was a good idea, and the board thought it was a good idea for us to put together today's Zoom webinar?
Yeah, so I think that we were talking about how so many journalists are friends, with COVID and being at home. It's sort of like people are getting a little more creative. So maybe you're making sourdough, or maybe you want to start a podcast, lots of different things to kind of curb that weirdness of kind of being trapped inside. But a lot of people have, really great content, whether they've been following a story for a long time, or maybe they need a creative outlet and they don't even really want to talk about journalism. There are a lot of different ways you can be creative with audio and make it into something really cool that people want to listen to. So we want to help other people. So kind of the basics of how to get set up, how to know if you have a good idea, some tips and tricks, and then answer any questions if you have any really specific, specifics that we didn't touch on.
Awesome. Again, yeah, you can see Lindsey's a lot further down the road on her podcast journey, and I'm just getting started. So we'll have, different points of view, which I think is going to be great for those of you who have not taken the plunge. But for those of you who might already be podcasting, some of what we say today might, be common knowledge if you've been doing it a while. So this is like more of a podcast starter kit, podcasting 101, if you will. So again, there's so many wonderful resources out there, but in case you have not began looking at what it might take to start this journey, we really wanted to kind of give you an opener as to what we did and what has worked for us. So we are going to jump right in, and I'm going to throw to Lindsey, and I'm just going to ask her questions, and she's going to ask me questions, guys. And we want you to ask questions as well. So how will that look? There's a chat box in Zoom, and if you will, please just type in a question, raise your hand. We can see you if you raise your hand by clicking on the raise your hand button as well. So we want to get you involved and let us know your thoughts as we start this discussion. So I'm gonna, we kind of did an outline, guys, and again, it might be free flowing. So feel free to ask whatever you want. But I'm going to start with Lindsey, and she talked about doing 4 very different, might I add, podcasts, which I love. So Lindsey, just tell us a little bit about what allowed you or inspired you in a sea full of podcasts to start the ones that you did, and what our viewers might want to consider when they're thinking about starting their podcast.
Yeah, so I think that a really cool thing with being a journalist and starting a podcast is that you might have some really in-depth knowledge about something really specific, and you really want to tell the world, and maybe you're already doing that in print or on TV or a different medium, but podcasting is just a different way to do that, and you can get to be really creative, and we can kind of show you how to do that. So, I mean, with Oddball, which was this weird sort of UFO mystery, which is really just kind of about like how this thing impacted this family's life, and all, there's just so many rabbit holes, and it just got really interesting and crazy. But it was just like one of those things where I heard about it, but no one really knew much about it, but it was really unique to my hometown. And I felt that, if anyone was going to tell this, it should be me, and I am here, so I have access to all the sources. Like other podcasts have done stories on this specific incident, but you didn't feel like you were there in Jacksonville. So I thought that kind of like was sort of an edge I had. And I think that when you're starting a podcast, you really have to figure out if it's something that you can kind of uniquely tell. And I have some ways of how to gauge that. And a lot of these pointers are not things I came up with myself. I actually met with a podcast consultant, and he gave me this really amazing explainer, and I just want to share it with the world, but I just want to not take credit for it. This guy named Nate Toby is the one who presented this to me. Okay, so something I thought was very helpful and so true is that your podcast, like the summary of your podcast, should really only be 1 to 2 sentences, and it should be really clear and vivid and specific. So here's some examples of some podcast summaries that are done really well. So there's a podcast called Song Exploder, and this is how it's summed up. Musicians take apart their songs piece by piece and tell the story of how they were made. So it's like just literally telling you exactly what the podcast is about. Here's another one. It's from the podcast Invisibilia. A narrative journey through the invisible forces that affect human behavior. So yeah, it's a narrative podcast. It's cool. It kind of sounds like Radio Lab or something like that. But what's different about it is that every single episode is going to talk about an invisible force of some sort. Here's another one, a podcast about whiskey and cats. Like, that's so simple, but like, if you don't like whiskey and cats, you're not going to like this podcast. But if you do like whiskey and cats, this is literally like the podcast for you. And so I think that you shouldn't worry about excluding people, because when I'm looking for podcasts, like there are so many out there. Like, I want to click on something and read it and know exactly what I'm going to get. So I know that you might think like, oh, that's kind of far down the line. I don't even have a podcast yet. But when you're thinking of an idea, it's really good to be able to kind of sum it up and do that little elevator pitch so that anyone you're working with, everyone's on the same page. And that it is narrowed down enough where you know what you're looking for. You know, like if this or that topic really fits what you're trying to accomplish. Because sometimes you might have a really good idea, but maybe it doesn't fit into what your podcast is really doing, and that matters. Just a few other things that I want to talk for forever. I want to get on the other things, but you need to answer the whys, like why this? It should fill, a gap in the market. Why you? You should be uniquely suited to do it. If you're a journalist and you're covering, say you're an education reporter, like maybe you're profiling this one school and you're kind of doing a documentary on it. Well, why this? Well, because it's like something that maybe it's something that is sort of showcasing what everyone's talking about on a national level, but you're like, I have a school right here that this is happening in. And you're uniquely suited to do it because you live in that town, you know those people, you have the sources. Like, these are all things that you need to make sure you have a good understanding of. And then why now? It should be timely in some way. It's also kind of important to think about like who would subscribe to this show. And I found a cool way to do it is to actually think of like very specific profiles of people. Like, I think that someone who would really enjoy this is in their mid 30s, maybe they're divorced and none of their friends are, and they're like this, they would really resonate with this. So really getting specific like that, and then thinking like, how can I find that person and market to that person? Like, thinking of all those things, it's all good. Those are all things you should be thinking of. And then who is your host and why is that the host that, if it's your podcast, and it's your reporting, like, yeah, you're probably the right person to be the host, but your audience needs to understand why you're uniquely suited to tell this story. So really being upfront with like, listen, I've been covering this for 10 years. I know every single person in this industry. Like, I know this, like really letting people know that like, oh, I'm actually going to get a lot of really good information for this. So those are just some tips I have when you're figuring out, should I make this podcast? Now, Suzette, you're doing something a little bit different.
I wanted to piggyback on some of the things that you mentioned, and I think you covered a lot there, Lindsey, which is awesome, because if you're sitting there and you're wondering, is this for me? There are so many different formats this can take. So as Lindsey pointed out, she has podcasts that are literally telling one long story with smaller episodes about that same subject matter. So that might work for you if you're covering a very, very interesting story that has a lot of different facets and won't be something that you can take care of in 30 minutes or an hour, 45 minutes. You might have just a wonderful podcast about that one event, occurrence, or topic. The other way that she explained that I see is also very popular is if you have one, say, beat that you cover, and then you want to make each episode talk about something very specific and unique about that beat, which is something I find quite interesting as well. I was listening to, and again, I don't want to take credit, and I wish I knew who I heard it from, but 2 tips when you're actually starting to record based on what she's also saying with how to title a podcast. When you start to record your first episode and all episodes, you really want to get to a really drilled down, clear description of what the listener is going to get, both in the title and when you start to record. So in your first 15 seconds and maybe even 30 seconds before a person decides whether they're going to stay and listen on your podcast and put that phone down and be like, okay, I'm going to tune in. You want to make sure you're very clear up front and in an interesting way as to what you're offering them and what they're going to get in that episode. So that's a little bit further down in our discussion, but we want to start thinking ahead as how we are going to build this podcast. And then the other point, and I think it's going to segue into our next question, is that you want to realize that there is a different format for you and for I in terms of whether you want to do it as a solo, which will have a whole different approach, whether you're going to do it in interview form, whether you're going to do it with a co-host like I'm doing it. So there are other considerations on top of how you're going to present the information that you've been working on, say through your work, or like me, if you're going to do storytelling, we have a different approach as well in terms of how we're going to present the information and how we're going to organize the various episodes.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think that, like, for instance, you know, like we did a climate change podcast and I wasn't the host of it. Our climate change reporter was, and I kind of worked with him to help him. But, you know, that was really it was a different interview every episode, but it was all focused on like our area and what our area is doing to, like, specifically, it was like, how are we, you know, making changes? What are we actually doing to actually prepare for the next storm? So, you know, that's, like you said, like, that's a different kind of way to do it. But yours, I really love, and you're kind of doing it as like a way to get away from journalism and like an outlet. And so can you talk a little bit about, you know, the format
Sure.
and why you decided to do that?
Absolutely. Thank you. So one thing I tried to do when I earlier, I think it was January 2020, I was like, I'm going to do a podcast this year. And I really didn't know what it would entail and didn't have the subject matter or anything like that. But right about COVID, when COVID hit March, April, I started thinking about it more concretely. And I reached out to someone because a producer, a friend we have in common, suggested that, you know what, you two together would make an awesome duo for a podcast. And honestly, I had been invited to do or help with a couple other ones. And this was the first time that something sparked and I thought, wow, this could really be something special. So I'm a co-host of a podcast. I won't say the name yet. We are getting ready to record episode number 6. And it's very funny. I read somewhere that usually people give up by episode 7. So trust and believe I'm going to be at the 10 series season when we're done. But we decided to team up because we thought what she brought to the table, and she is a local radio host here in the South Florida area, and what I do through TV, I think we kind of complemented each other. And there was something that we wanted to speak about in terms of the current social climate, as well as our lives as being women of color. So we decided to do more of the storytelling podcast style. We are doing weekly episodes now, and we're going to be banking them, and we'll tell you what that means. But we're trying to, before we release it, create a nice cushion of episodes so that we don't miss a week and we don't get behind. But it's been a lovely journey with understanding how to prepare for a podcast. And I'm just looking down here at my notes. And the first thing I'll let you know is that when we started, we really were trying to meet the day before and almost script the episode. And I've gotten away from that. We've gotten away from that because I think it didn't come out as naturally as we wanted to. And we were kind of more focused on making sure we hit certain points and making sure we didn't leave anything out. Now, our approach is much more of a broader outline where we're not even talking before we go on air. We just share notes, text messages, and emails about, these are some things that are coming up in my life. How about you? These are some things I'm hearing in my friends' lives. And then obviously informed by, you know, the political climate and the social climate of what's going on in the last few months. But it's been an interesting journey. I think we're getting better with each episode as we become more comfortable with opening ourselves up. Now, again, my approach is different. I'm sharing personal stories and putting myself out as a means of kind of an extension of my brand. Of course, everybody has their own purpose for putting a podcast together, but for me and for her, we both thought this will complement what we're already trying to do in our respective career paths. So it's been quite an interesting journey. We talk about everything from love and relationships. We talked about women and age this last episode. Oh, it was so good. And we're talking about all the aspects of womanhood and for us, particularly as women of color, that we think other women will find interesting and that are sometimes taboo and don't get put out there and for open discussion. So it's been a very fun and really kind of like, I don't know, I find like I get my own release from cathartic is the word I was looking for, experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been really fun.
I have a question for you too. Do you edit your episodes down at all, or do you just straight? I know that you.
So
use
we
it, but-
haven't. We haven't. We thought with the nature of how we set it up, again, the producer friend actually has an all-in-one, and we're going to talk a little bit about equipment shortly, but all-in-one kind of podcasting machine, and he's taping it live. So we're not doing much editing, post-editing after at all. And there's another tip I want to share when we get some more tips and tricks when we're together, thinking ahead about what you might want to do with your setup if you're going to do a podcast. But I also want to just mention that, again, we are probably looking at it as a kind of more advanced version. I know there are all kinds of videos that tell you that all you need is Anchor and your phone. So we're not going to necessarily take that approach in this discussion. We want to give you tips that will make it sound as professional as possible, even if you're just beginning. So yes, there are people like, oh, just take your phone and go interview people, but we're not going to take that approach. We want to make sure we tell you about the ways in which you can enhance the listener experience so that it doesn't sound like it's your first podcast.
Nice. Oh.
All right, so let's talk mics. How about that? Let's talk mics. What are you doing for your mic, Lindsey? What do you use?
All right, so, okay, I'll show you what I use, and then I'll kind of get into some things you should consider when you're making your decision, and also some cheaper ways of doing it, especially if you're not totally sure if this is what you want to do yet. So this is what I use. So this is
nice.
Yeah, so this is the actual mic. It's a Rode NT-G1. It's going to run you a little over $200, so it's a little pricey. There are way more expensive ones, but I mean, for most people, it's a pretty big purchase. It comes with this, and then you stick it in one of these, which is called a pistol grip. It's a shotgun mic, a pistol grip. It's not very true to the stereotype of public radio. But anyways, yeah, it's put it in here, and what this does is it basically stabilizes your mic so that, if you're holding it by the actual mic part, it's going to pick up the noise of your hand and you're moving it around. So this helps it be super secured, and it helps you get better sound. And my mic uses an XLR cable. So what that means is that this is not going to plug directly into your computer, but an XLR cabled mic is normally really good for if you're going out in the field, if you're doing a lot of interviews in person, if you're getting a lot of nat sound, meaning like natural noise, like, you're going to, maybe you need sound of a concert or something like that, or you're interviewing someone out and about and you want to get, sound of what the environment they're in. This is a really great mic, and it plugs into my recorder, which this is a very popular recorder for public radio and podcasting in general. It's a little less expensive. I think this one is going to run you a little over $150, but it's a Zoom. It's the H4n Pro. It's like the most common one.
I've had one, yes.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. I would say that if you're going to spend money on something, the most important thing, in my opinion, is to have a good mic. But like, okay, say you don't want to spend $200+ on a mic right now. You can actually start off using your iPhone. Believe it or not that everyone has an iPhone, but most smartphones actually have
Android lady here.
I know.
Okay.
But most smartphones do have relatively good mics.
Very good
so it's
mics.
really about the environment you're in. If you can be like, for instance, like if you can record yourself like in a closet, like not even necessarily have a studio in a closet, but maybe you need to record yourself and you're facing clothes. Anything that's padded, carpet is good, rugs are good, things like that that kind of soundproof the space. But I'll say as far as getting equipment, how I chose my mic is I had a really terrible mic that I just was given at the station. I don't even remember what it was. My editor bought her own mic. I used it and I loved it. And then I was like, I'm getting that mic. So I got that mic. But I do have some, I can show you in a second here. I do have recommendations just based on mics my friends have, but I would just tell you that if you really want to do some research, I mean, there are so many like best podcasting mics. There's so many different lists, and I mean, they always have ones I've heard that are really good.
And if I may, I'll just throw in that, you know, there are a lot of good mics under $100. So, especially, and Lindsey, I want you to talk a little bit about, if you can mention the USB mics, especially if it's just you on a, you know, you're just recording yourself speaking into a mic. You might not need one that allows you, you know, to go on the road and see other, you know, interview other people and pick up ambient sound, etc. So a USB mic, you know, a very simple one that plugs into your computer and is read by a program on your computer. And you just got to be careful how you place your mouth to it, because certain mics, if you move your head any at all, you're going to lose your voice. And of course, it's going to sound different to the listener. So you have to practice. And I just wanted to also throw in that you do need a good pair of headphones as well, so that you can listen to yourself, so that when things are picked up on your mic, you're kind of gauging how loud you are through this over-ear headphones. Again, it doesn't have to be a very expensive pair, but you're going to need a pair to make sure that your levels are. But tell us about the USB mics and what other mics you use.
Yeah, all good points. So if you know, the two main ways to connect your mic to something, whether it's a recorder or your computer, is a USB connection or an XLR connection. You know, some people will say like XLRs just sound better. Can't really tell that much of a difference. It's more of what you want to do. But you know, if you are just kind of recording yourself, and maybe the interviews you're doing, you're recording over your computer or you're using phone tape, and we're going to get into ways to do remote interviews, because that's probably what a lot of people are doing right now. You may not need to have a separate recorder, or you might not need to have like a box middleman mixer sort of thing. But it's difficult to record more than one person if it's a USB. Normally it's just one mic that goes into your computer. You don't have multiple plugins. Maybe there's some adapter. But when you do that, it can record straight into whatever audio editing program you're using. And there are several you can use. We can get into that in a moment. But it's super easy. And so if you're just starting and you just need to record some voicing, and maybe you're using phone interviews, or maybe you're not doing interviews and maybe you have a different style, or you're telling a story, that's a really good way to go. You know, for me, like the XLR cable and this mic, it works really well for me. It's actually pretty compact too, so I can go out, you know, with it. Let me show you some different options that I know are pretty good. Let's see here. All right, you can see this, right? Okay, so that's right. Yeah, so this right here is the, this is my mic. So as you can see, it's $244. It's
all right, public radio.
Amazing though, I recommend it. This one right here is a very popular podcasting mic. It's only $129. This allows you to record in a shotgun setting, which like a shotgun mic, which is what I use. Basically what that means is that it's dialed into exactly where you're pointing it, and it's not picking up a lot of the background noise. And that's a really great thing, especially if you're recording yourself. And I also use it to record tape of like, you know, kids swimming and stuff like that. And I don't feel like it inhibits it. This is the way I like to go. But this mic actually lets you change it so that you can actually be recording two people talking and it's focused on the two people. It can be focused on one person, or it can be focused all around. So that's a really great thing. And a lot of people have this mic when they're starting out podcasting. So this is one option. Again, there are so many options and I have not tested even many of them. So it's hard for me to be like, get this one. But you know, just this right here is a really good podcasting mic. It's very expensive. Well, you know, it's probably the same. It's around the same as the one I use here. This one, I believe, is an XLR. This is another Rode mic. I think this one might be the USB. One's a USB, one's an XLR. But these are really good podcasting mics that people have. Samsung. This one is also really highly rated, and I have a friend who has this one, and it sounds very good. This is the recorder that I use. But yeah, basically, if you want to buy something expensive, if you want to invest in something, invest in a mic. And then you can get a cheaper recorder, and it's totally fine. Normally, I would say that that's the most important part. If you don't want to get a mic, you can use your iPhone. You just need to be recording smart. So you need to be in a quiet place. You need to be, you know, covering yourself. I know this sounds weird, but a lot of people, like if you're in public radio and you have to record on the fly somewhere, if you have like a blanket or a jacket, like putting it around you, like creating a barrier so that there's no echoing, so that you're not picking up a lot of background noise. Doing those things, always really great. Also, I'll share all the links to all of these later too, just so that you all have them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's so many great mics out there. I didn't see the Audio Technica, which is another one that people tend to recommend. And there's so many guys. We are, again, she's just showing you a few. We'll make sure we give you the links, as she said. But it's not a matter of, you know, the right mic. Might be the right mic for you. So please do your research. This is just a sample of what some of the mics are that are very popular and what they can do.
All right. If you have an XLR, if you have an XL, if you're using an XLR mic, and you want it to go straight to your computer, you can do that too. But you're going to need a box, like a mixer box. I'm going to bring up Suzette. This is what you've been using. I know that you did not purchase this yourself, but this is
absolutely. So this is more expensive. And it's definitely, you know, another setup. So again, I told you guys I'm working with a team. I'm very fortunate to have a producer who invested in what you see on your screen there, which is the Rode. And actually, that's why I was looking down on my phone to get the exact name, but I know my girl Lindsey had it. Thank you. The Rode Rodecaster Pro Integrated Podcast Production Console. Whew, what does that mean? So this is something that Rode brand sells as an all-in-one console. It's ready-made. It has mic plugins. It has headphone plugins. It makes it very easy. And like I said, easy, you know, if you know what you're doing in terms of testing your levels and making sure your audio is very, very tightly monitored. But again, we have someone who is helping us. So we have two hosts, and we'll show you a picture before we end of my setup. Two hosts sitting across from each other with masks, mind you. We don't even need any type of shield for the mic to monitor our hard consonants. But we actually have someone that's able to, you see it there? Hey, living room strong. We were in a studio, but we're living room strong. And as you can see there, my producer with the blue mask, he's in front of right there, the Rode console. And he has it plugged in basically to his software. So as it's recording through the machine, it's going directly to his software. We're not doing much post-editing at all. He's bringing in the music live, and we're going to talk a little bit about intro music and outro music in a moment. But as you see there, my partner in crime, she's on the other side, Miss Stitches, and she is in the tan sweater. And we also have mics that are on, and I forget what these anchors are called, that are clipped to the table. I wish I'd looked up that name. But we bought those specially so that, again, as Lindsey pointed out, they would be stable. They would not, you know, bounce around with movement of any kind. And we can extend them to our mouths very easily so that we're speaking directly. These are mics that we have to speak directly into. Literally, I'm almost resting my chin with my mask on the mic as I speak to get consistent sound throughout the podcast. But that's what we look like. It's totally home setup. And I'll point out one more thing, as I was going to mention in terms of hot tips. We are doing a visual recording as well as an audio recording. I don't know if you can see in front of that plant. We have an iPhone set up, and we have a 2 iPhone recording setup because we're thinking ahead in terms of how we are going to market this podcast. And we want to make sure we are able to meet guests and hopefully new fans that will maybe not be in the podcasting realm and may not, you know, stumble across us, but we'd be able to put clips on, you know, YouTube, put clips on Facebook, Instagram, and maybe even TikTok, so that people would find like an interesting part of the conversation through the visual medium, and then hopefully they'll spend the time and make the effort to look up the podcast. But yeah, that's us. We're using that all-in-one console. it's again, if you can afford it, it's pricey, but if you're going to make the investment, I've found that we've really enjoyed using it.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's great that you have this mixer board.
Yep.
I wish I had that.
Yeah, the mixer board comes, ooh, we love it. And we test, I'm telling you, we test and test levels. Like it takes 15 minutes before we even start recording because he wants to make sure the levels are perfect.
Yeah.
So yep, that's what we use. But you don't have to go that route, guys. Again, there's a large range of what you can use to just get started. But that's something, again, he's helping other people with podcasts. So he wanted to make the investment. So you want to move on? Let's talk about software, shall we?
Yeah.
You want to start? What software? Because we're not editing per se, but what software are you using to record and perhaps edit?
I personally use Adobe Audition. It's super easy. It's something that I taught myself, and most of these you can teach yourself just by going to YouTube tutorials. Like, it's really not super difficult. It's much easier than editing video. I mean, Adobe Audition is something I use at work. I also personally just have it. So I use I have it through the cloud. It's $19.99 a month. There's also Pro Tools, which is a very popular software editing system people use for podcasts all the time. Most of the big podcast networks and whatnot use Pro Tools. It's also, I switched from Adobe Audition to Pro Tools, and it took me it just took me a few days to really catch on. It's just different key commands and whatnot. So if you know one, you probably can catch on to the others. But a free one is called Audacity, and you can just download it on your computer.
That's what we use.
Yeah, it's awesome. You might not be able to fix little, I don't know, if there's a lot of background noise, it might be harder to take that out. I haven't looked into all of the other things it can do to fix sound, which is why you should just get great sound in the first place, which we can talk about in a little bit.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's.
And I was reading also that, and I'm not a Mac user, I'm a PC, but people use GarageBand.
Yeah.
That is a free program as well that comes with your Mac. So there are various free versions of recording software that you can use. So you don't always have to start out paying a monthly subscription model fee. You can always try first with what comes with your PC or your Mac, and then see, if you're growing into possibly something a little bit more advanced.
Yeah. I'll kind of also talk about soundproofing a little bit. I went into it.
Sure, go ahead. Yes.
But I think a lot of people are going to be working from home, and you're not going to have a studio. So what you need to consider are things like not having the AC on while you record. That's really important. Don't be by a noisy window. You might have a really cool desk set up by a window, but if there are always, like right now, cicadas are going crazy outside, the more interior of a room, the better the sound's going to be. Like I said, make sure you cool down the house, turn off the AC. You can even just pad the walls with blankets and whatnot, make sure it's carpeted. If it's echoey, that might pick up. So, and this goes for even when you're interviewing people. So these are just little things where you can make a little makeshift studio. Yeah, you can also buy foam. It's not super expensive, and you can kind of make a little dome that you're in, little walls. So there's a lot of different options, but just, it's something to think about, that you are in an area that's not going to have a lot of external noise, that's not by the refrigerator,
I was just about to say, the refrigerator makes a lot of noise. We're at home, guys, so sometimes we don't hear the ice machine coming down and things like this. But it's a real issue. You got to be very cognizant of ambient noise, because even the most, depending on how sensitive your mic is, it's going to pick up all this, stuff that's going on in your environment. So you really, really have to concentrate and tell people who live with you, if you have kids and things like that, mom's recording, we can't do this or whatever, or record when no one's home, put your phone on silent, things like that, your phone beeping and things like this. I know it goes without saying, but we really want to just emphasize that it does matter how quiet, the more quiet, the better.
Yeah. I mean, I know this too, because you might think your space is quiet, But the way I know most people don't really think about all of the extra noises is I go and record at people's homes all the time, and they'll think, oh, this is a really quiet room. And there's like a really loud clock ticking. And it's something that until you just both sit there completely silent for 30 seconds, you probably won't realize. But that's something that a clock ticking in the background, or someone constantly opening and shutting the door, and they're not, people don't realize how quiet you need the space to be. So I think, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I'll just say it because I'm thinking of it right now, which is like when you're going out and you're doing an interview with somebody, don't be afraid to really, take charge and say, this clock, can we move this clock off the wall? Do you mind if we go into a different room? Can I listen to this? Can we try this room? And it might be weird because they probably planned, like, we're doing the interview right here at my kitchen table, but you're like, oh wait, no, the refrigerator's right there, unless you want to unplug your refrigerator. But I found that like early in my career, I'm not very confrontational. And so I didn't really want to ask people to, do something that, that they might not expect. But it's so much harder to have to edit that out afterward and deal with it afterward, that you just really need to, like, even if you start the interview and you thought it was good, if you're realizing, well, something's not right, stop the interview and say, I'm really sorry. This right here is just making a lot of noise. Your phone keeps buzzing, things like that. And just, fix the problem. You'll definitely appreciate, you'll be appreciative of yourself later.
Absolutely. And I do that both on the visual side as well as the audio side. So if I'm looking at a visual, I tell him, let me see what it looks like on the iPhones, so I can tell you, move your kid's picture, move that over there. We don't need that. Like, yes, we're at home, but we don't want, too many distractions going on. But very good point, Lindsey. Very, very good point. All right. So let's talk about content. What do you think?
I agree. Let's go.
All right. So moving right along. And guys, do you see any questions yet?
I have
any hands raised?
I'm really sorry, Valerie. I just saw this. I was looking in the chat section and not the Q&A section. And she asked, is this a video podcast or an audio podcast? I think she may,
for me,
correct me if I'm wrong. I think she may have been asking you that, but you're doing
okay. No, mine is an audio. But as a broadcaster, I think in video, I think that first. But no, mine is an audio podcast. But we know, especially with my co-host following on Instagram and stuff, the visual is going to matter to us when we start marketing. So same thing with me. I have a pretty decent social media presence. So we, instead of posting audio clips when it's time for us to kind of put ourselves out there and start marketing, and we might do some of that, we want to make sure we have a video component, for the very reason of, allowing people to see us, because something about that, video just connects. So that's why we're doing the video, but that's not the purpose. No, this is audio podcast.
Yeah. I've done only audio too. So.
And it forces me to figure out what I'm wearing, which I hate every episode, but that's another story. All right. So let's talk a little bit about content and what goes into the podcast. So how do we start? Let's start with the intro. How about music? Lindsey, what are your thoughts when it comes to selecting intro music?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, the music is going to go with whatever your podcast is. And people are generally really creative and they know what they are looking for, or maybe they don't, never mind. But so at my job, like, we actually have a music library we subscribe to, so we're free to pick from that. But I've also had people write music for stuff I've been making. I think it's just really important not to use copyrighted music. When we're talking about fair use, there are all these things like, oh, you can use 15 seconds. Like, none of that is true. Like, you can't use music that's not yours. I think that.
Say it again for him, Lindsey. Say it again one more time, please.
This is the thing.
For the people in the back.
You can't decorate your podcast to make it pretty and sound good with music that's not yours. Now, it doesn't mean you can't play clips from music if you're talking about the music. Maybe, like, for instance, I listen to It's Been a Minute. It's a Sam Sanders podcast every week. And he always starts it off with a song that's on his mind and why it's relevant to something that's going on right now. And he plays a little clip of it. Like, that's okay. You're talking about the song. There's a reason you're playing it. It's also, if you're doing commentary on a song, you're dissecting a song, you're talking about a specific artist and you're playing clips because that's the point of the episode. Like, that's okay, because that's part of journalism. That's part of you explaining something, and but it's not the same as just taking someone's song that you really like and making that the intro to your podcast that you use every week. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So what do you all do for music?
So yeah, for us, I'm very fortunate that my co-host is also a musician. So this is a note to you guys watching that, you know a lot more people and have many more resources at your disposal sometimes than we realize. So we were fortunate that, she also is a spoken word poet and performs and writes music. So we're using one of her songs to open us up, and it's perfect. And what I love about it, and what you want to think about when you're setting the tone for your podcast, is, like, again, drawing the listener in and obviously making sure it reflects kind of the tone you're trying to set for what you are going to talk about and what the listener is going to experience. So we have a very soulful, very R&B, neo-soul-y, very bass-line heavy, acoustic still, song that she wrote, and it's really good. So every time, like, we don't even hear it, only our producer hears it when it's coming in, and we just pretend to be jamming for the visual, so that when we start, the people can see that, okay, we were listening to the same thing that they were at the beginning. But yeah, so we're very fortunate. She actually has music, but you can go to places like Audio Jungle, and there's music there for like $1, $2, and pick things that would fit you. So yeah, there are other resources though online if you don't know anyone that can help you fill those musical gaps, because you definitely need music.
You have a music question. Valerie's asking, is music a firm requirement? What would you say? Do you feel like music is a firm requirement? Oh, you're frozen for me. Okay. You were frozen.
Was I frozen?
I don't know if I was frozen for everyone or
you were frozen for me, so I was like, okay. I'm probably frozen for her. Thank you,
I don't
internet.
know if I was frozen for everyone else, but I had a question come in, which was, okay, is music a firm requirement? So what do you think?
I think all the podcasts I listen to have good intro music. That's just, and I'm a fan of the art as well. So as a fan of the craft, I hear music and I'm drawn into, okay, let me hear what they have to say. And I give it 15, 20 seconds. And then I'm like, I'm going to listen to this or I'm not. So as a person that I'm thinking about the consumer of that podcast, I would say yes. But obviously you can do what suits you. And if you don't have music right now, you can start talking, but I just don't know of any. Do you know of any without music?
I don't, and that's what I was going to say. I agree with you. So it's not a firm requirement in that there are no rules. You can make whatever you want, but I think that at least some intro music and outro music
it's like a must.
It's definitely expected when I listen to something, and it's just one of those things too, where you hear it, you know what you're going to get, you're getting into it. Like, I do think that there's something kind of special too about knowing a podcast and getting into it every time, and there being these things that, you kind of take comfort in expecting. But like that was saying, there's royalty-free music.
You can find music, Dot. You can find music. And I'm telling you, it almost forms a cue for me now, because for the podcast, I do love when I hear that music come on, I'm like, yes, I'm going to have a great experience. I'm going to be pumped up after this, 50 minutes. So it's good. It's a part of the branding. So yes, find some that suit you, even if you have to pay a little money, not much. I would say definitely include it.
I wanted to let's see. One thing about music real quick too. I have an app called Bloom, and it kind of it's like these sort of drony, like doo sounds or whatever. And basically, like, I'm not a musician, and so for me, like, even with GarageBand and stuff, it's just, I'm not really into it. But with this app, you kind of can just like click the screen, and there's like, different tones in different areas, and you can like layer stuff, and you can make some like really cool little, it's kind of like a mood board. And I've used those in my own pieces to kind of transition, especially when, something kind of heavy happens or something like that. So there are definitely a lot of different apps where you can kind of make up your own little tunes and stuff. I don't know that if you're not a musician, if you'd be able to make great intro music, but you can definitely make segue music. Like maybe you're doing an interview and you're kind of changing topics and you need something a little between it to break it up. you can definitely make something that can go in between there.
And yeah, definitely, it does not have to be a song. Sometimes lots of podcasts use clips over a beat, over music. So it's like, the same 5 clips, but they're very interesting and they're kind of like, attention grabbing. And then the music is just playing behind them as the form of the intro. So it doesn't have to be a full out song if that's what you're thinking. It can definitely be kind of like a clip of music kind of overlaid with some kind of vocal or some kind of maybe parts of your story or whatever your podcast highlights are. Okay, I love it. Thanks for that question. So no copyrighted music. Try to make friends with a musician if you can. We posed this question just when we were getting ready for this webinar. What's in a name? What's in a name, Lindsey? You talked a little bit about being able to describe your podcast in a kind of very clean and succinct way. What about the name of your podcast? Can you repeat those for us and how you came up with those?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the ones I've done. So we had Oddball, and that was because it was literally about an oddball. And in a lot of the old newspaper clips, like this crazy thing happened in the 70s, and a lot of the headlines, they would call it like oddball from outer space and stuff like that. And it's just like literally, and it's also just like a weird thing. So I just called the podcast Oddball. We had Adapt, which is about adapting sea level rise, that's actually the name of this whole digital online presence we have about our sea level rise reporting. So that's like the Adapt podcast, which goes with all of our other Adapt reporting. So that was kind of a no-brainer there. I would say that my first podcast, What It's Like, a lot of other podcasts are named that, and I did not really look it up. And that's something I want to say is that, you should just Google your podcast name. It's also the name of a song that's popular. So it's just sort of like, those are things that people do all the time. Like there are so many podcasts named the same thing. Just try to find a different name for it, and it's
we're in the middle of that too.
Yeah.
I won't share our podcast name, guys, because I'm trying to copyright it actually. But yeah, it was a big deal. We in our kind of prep calls, we did brainstorming, we did emails of like, this is what I thought about, we looked it up, what made sense for her brand, what made sense for my brand, that kind of thing. It was like a whole process. I think it probably took us a month, maybe 3 weeks to come up with a name. So it's a very big part of, your branding, of course, but then again, maybe because human beings are often socialized the same, someone else has had that idea. So definitely look it up. Definitely make sure that name is clear and that you can own it, I would say. How about some other tips?
Question.
I think we have, we do, go ahead.
Naming question. Are there no copyright issues with naming your podcast? I think there can be, actually. We've thought about
Absolutely.
that. We looked into to make sure that it wasn't the name. Also, just because you don't want it to be associated with something else that's nothing to do with your podcast. But you're right. Like if there is something copyrighted and you're naming it the same thing and it gets really popular, like you could run into some issues. So.
And I will say, and I'm not a copyright attorney, I'm another type of attorney, but I have worked with copyright attorneys who have told me, even when things I have presented to them to get copyrighted for me, and I choose them because I know they know how many different types and mediums each copyright can cover. So some of them allow you to cover literary items with that name, others online, everything online with that name. So there are different categories, and I'm not going to go into that, legalese, but you want to make sure that if you are going to try to brand this, you can own the website, I would say. Maybe even the social media handles, look those things up and grab them from the time you have the idea. People are so, like, again, we come up with similar ideas. There's 7 billion plus people. So if you think of it and you can grab all the social media handles, maybe the website, and then look at, and it's a free lookup, really, the United States copyright records are like a Google away. So I'm not saying going that deep, but yes, you can run into it. Look at what happened with like Lady Annabellum, Lady A, and like a musician who was also named Lady A. So, and again, they're both producing music. So it just depends, is my answer. But yes, you do want to kind of just make sure you're not immediately aware that you have someone who's in the same type of material with the same name. You definitely want to be aware of that. All right, I think we've been good in terms of the specifics of what we've been doing, let's just go to general tips. What do you think, Lindsay, of overall? And we're going to just kind of like, I guess, rapid fire, or just as you think of them.
Yeah, I have some audio too I want to share with everyone. I'll say my
Sure.
first tip is like 101, something you have to do if you're getting audio. Honestly, if you're capturing audio anywhere, which is to gather room tone. So what this means, and you have to do this even if you're recording with an iPhone, whatever, is once you interview somebody, this is for in-person interviews normally, but like once you interview someone and you're done, you have to remember to do this, which is to say, hey, I just need to grab some sound of the room. And they're going to be like, what are you talking about? And then you're going to be like, I just need like 30 seconds of like the room where you are standing. I just need to record it. So they stop talking and you start recording. Normally they just don't really, because it's an awkward silence, they just go, so anyway, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no. I need sound of the room silent. And so like we were saying, you think a room is silent. It's not, even if you take all the measures, like you need to get sound of that room. This way, when you go back and you're, maybe you're recording your voice and you like have that edited in, or you have that laid out in the audio session, and then you have their clip, even if you're both think you're in the most silent places ever, there's going to be like a really abrupt, sharp sound, which is the different room tones clashing essentially, right? So like you recorded yourself and now you have the audio clip here. What you need to do is take some of that room tone of where you were and to put it right next to it and kind of fade it under. So that way, and like kind of crossfade them. So that way it's like a gradual a gradual transition into whatever space you're in now. So that's 101, like something I'm very
That's a great tip, guys.
It's also
great
something that
tip.
everyone forgets to do until you're used to doing it. And it's also kind of awkward because you're just like standing there for 30 seconds staring at each other and not talking. And then they normally try to start talking because it's awkward and you're like, no, you can't talk. All right. I'm going to share some audio tricks right now. So I'm going to go to present.
And I would love for you, and again, my podcasts have not involved interviews. A lot of people are going to be interviewing via Zoom or Skype or by phone. So if there are any tips there, please go ahead after you show some of these great clips.
That's what I'm getting into now. Okay. All right. So say you're doing your podcast and you're using, you're recording remotely, right? It's the safest thing to do right now. So if you want to record phone tape, which there are a lot of apps that do that. So for instance, are we both on the screen? Okay. Anyways, so if, oh no. Okay, there we go. Let me redo this 1 second.
No worries at all. And we did, have a slideshow, but we didn't want to bore you guys with like a slideshow. We're going to just show you what's really most pertinent. So she's going to bring back up some tips for audio editing and putting things into your podcast.
Okay, so there are different phone apps. Like there's one called Tape a Call. I mean, when I was at the station recording, we had what was called a Getner. It's a brand name, but basically it's like how you record phone calls. And, but there are ways you can, download an app and you can actually like talk on the phone on your smartphone. You can press record on the app and you're recording your phone call. And this is basically what phone tape sounds like. What do you take just from your first glance at it? Like, what are you seeing?
Right. So the image that I received looks like it's probably a photograph of a copy of an X-ray.
Okay, so you can tell she's on the phone. It sounds like she's on the phone. But what I had her do is I had her use her smartphone and I had her record herself on her side of things. So this is Suzette. Am I doing something wrong? I just got your text.
No, I was just going to say you could put it in present mode and that way we won't see all the other slides. That's it. No, it's fine. Totally fine.
You're right. Okay. No, you're right. Okay. Okay. So you heard the phone tape. So this is her, I had her record herself on her smartphone. So she's talking to me on the phone, I'm recording on my side, and then she is holding up her iPhone or her smartphone to her mouth like this and recording herself. Then afterward, normally with voice recordings, there's an option just to email it. I said, just email it to me. And then this is what it sounded like from her side.
Right. So the image that I received looks like it's probably a photograph of a copy of an X-ray.
Okay, so compare that to...
Looks like it's probably a photograph of a copy.
So much better, right? And it's like a really easy thing, and you just have to ask, and people normally will do it. So that's one tip I highly recommend. Right now, a lot of people are using Zoom to do interviews. And luckily on Zoom, you can literally just record on Zoom, which is really cool. So here is a Zoom recording I did.
I was attending the First Baptist Church in Jacksonville as a college kid, and they let me volunteer.
So I was recording him, and I have this copy. And then I also just had him record himself with his iPhone. So this is what his side sounds like.
We want to use our influence for good, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when there was very.
So both of these are way better than phone tape. I would say the in-person is a little bit better. But you know, it's always good to have two options, right? Because I've also done phone interviews. I've taped it, and I've had them record themselves and they didn't do a great job. Like maybe they were in a really noisy room. Maybe they were kind of like holding it, you know, doing this, or had it on the table, they weren't holding it up. Yeah. So if they're doing that, then okay, just use the phone tape, but it's always good to have some options. And here's like what it would sound like mixed. It kind of sounds like we're in the same room.
You know, what do you take just from your first glance at it? Like, what are you seeing?
Right. So the image that I received looks like it's probably a photograph of a copy of an X.
You know, what do you take?
So that's just another way to
I love that. That sounds like she's right there with you when you put the two together.
And it's super easy, and you just have to ask them to use their, like, luckily people have all these things now, and they have Zoom, and, you know, so it's so much easier to get better tape. I would also say just get creative, right? Like, maybe you're doing a sit-down interview and that's totally fine, but maybe you want to get creative, and maybe you've gone to all these cool places, like you're a journalist, like you're going to schools, you're going to, you know, like meetings, and you're running into these characters, and sometimes people just want to hear a little snapshot to kind of set the scene. So I just have some examples of ways I decided to set the scene to try to make it a little more creative. So the first one I'm going to play is a situation in which we were making a podcast. It was the climate change podcast. And we really needed to have a little something more. Like, this woman does these really cool, like, she goes to different companies and she basically teaches them the psychology behind believing in climate change. And we're just like, that's such a weird thing to do. It's such a cool job. Do you have, you know, can we go to one? Well, she had none scheduled, but she had one she had recorded. So she asked the people if they care. They didn't care. So we just were like, hey, can you send us the recording? Like, let's see what we can do. So this is what we did with it.
She teaches different groups how to communicate about environmental issues through workshops, like this one late last year.
I'm getting better. There we go. All right, I'm calling you in 1 minute early, if that's okay. Since everyone's here.
I think we're ready.
How's everybody feeling?
As a reporter who covers the environment and climate change almost exclusively, workshops like this fascinate me.
One of the things that
So we just kind of like wove it underneath for a while, like, you know, and she's like taking us through, you know, this presentation she gave. Here's one where I just wanted to give like a little bit of behind the scenes in there, because we had a really long interview and I felt like it was just like, I need something to kind of break it up, or something to kind of make it a little more interesting.
She's a pretty extraordinary woman who has an amazing history that people probably don't know.
So I'll just have you right here.
Okay.
Nan Kavanaugh is the former editor of
Okay. So basically what I did is I just like had all the mics on, and when I brought her in, like I had it all recording already, and, you know, give me like a little tiny scene in there where you're like feeling like, oh, okay, like we're sitting in the studio, we're getting settled in or whatever. I'll also point out you cannot in Florida record people without them knowing. So like I told her like, hey, the mics are on, just FYI, you know. So just, that's another thing. You can't just like call someone and record and not tell them that you're recording. Like, they have to know you're going to be recording when you call, if you want to get that effect of them like answering the phone. It's the law. Here's one where I'm kind of like, where we're taking the audience along. And this is, I think this is.
But 15 minutes later.
It is?
Yep.
And we found the house.
We found the house. Google did not help.
Nope.
Our intuition did not help.
Okay, so this is like in one of the podcast episodes, we were like on this chase trying to find this house that was in the woods, and the address didn't take us to the house. And it was like a really important part of the story. It was like this thing that we're just like, we have to find it. And we have like throughout the episode, we just have clips of us like asking people, and like us in the car just like super frustrated. And like what I did is I just had the mic running the whole time. You're never going to be upset that you have too much tape. You're going to be upset that you didn't catch that really cool moment. So if you're stepping into something that, you know, you're stepping into, so for instance, if I go to interview someone, I normally like get all my stuff assembled and ready to go, and I start recording before I like walk in. And once I get in, you know, so I get the sound of me knocking on the door, me going in, and all that kind of part, because all that can be used. And you don't want to do too many cliches, like those are in podcasts all the time, but it's always good to have it, because like maybe it's something really funny. And then, you know, obviously you let them know like, hey, I'm recording or whatever. But you know, you want to capture those moments that kind of have a, you know, kind of make you smile, or you think it's kind of funny, or maybe they say something crazy and you're like, you know, let's see what this one is. Oops.
And where did it come from? Can we put this mystery to rest? I'm going to try.
Absolutely.
These are just some photographs. This is a photograph of the ball itself, the Betz sphere. I think that's...
I start off talking to Ron Kivett, who photographed the ball shortly after it was found. So he's pulling out lots of pictures of the ball from this manila folder he brought.
And this is you with it?
Yes.
So that's just kind of an example of, you know, he brought all this stuff and he's going to be showing it to me anyway, which I think people probably for journalists do all the time. Like they're like, look at this picture, blah, 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 like capture them showing it to you and then kind of explain what you're seeing. And it really makes people feel like they're there. It captures people. Starting out a podcast with a scene like that is great. It's really easy to do. I mean, again, you can record all of this stuff with your iPhone. Sometimes I do that because it's like, it's like a little bit, sometimes I don't even know that I'm going to have to be recording, right? So I just pull out my iPhone, and I've used that for stories that are on the radio, on NPR, like they're good enough quality. But also it's a little less intimidating. Like if it's something like that where you're like going somewhere, you don't want to bring a mic, you don't want to have all this stuff or whatever, like just bring your phone and record some stuff, you know? Like I said, it's always better to have more than not enough sound or to miss something really good. So I've talked way too much, but Suzette.
No, I love it. I love it because I'm just picturing some of our favorite podcasts doing what you're talking about, which is making sure you don't miss like those subtle moments that may not even seem important in, you know, when they're occurring, but when you go back and listen, they just add so much depth and so much color to the story you're trying to tell. So absolutely. Those are some beautiful, beautiful nuggets there, Lindsey. Thank you. Thank you. I agree totally.
What tricks have you come across, or do you want to share?
I think when we talked a little bit about making sure, you know, the room and the sound in the room it's like the most important thing. When we talked a little bit about for us not having guests, when we discuss topics and we're trying to make sure we are going to discuss them in like a thoughtful way, and the outlining that takes place, I think that is probably one of the most important things for us in our format. I think a lot of people sometimes think they're just going to get on a podcast and talk. It might not work out for you as much. And again, we are journalists, we're smart, we know a thing or two. But I do think trying to master what we talked about initially, which is drill down on what your podcast is going to be about, and then you know, discover some topics that will fall underneath that, or just tell one long form story and just break it up. I think that understanding what you're going to say and why you should be doing it is probably the most paramount tip I would be able to share. Other than making sure technical things like your mic and how your head is not swiveling, because I tend to move, you can tell when I speak. So when I do my podcast, I have to really focus on just keeping my head in the same direction towards the mic, so that I'm not really creating a distant sound or these things. But I also think some of those things make our podcast interesting, because we laugh a lot. We joke. We do have crosstalk. It's not as bad as, I think everybody makes it out to be, but I think sometimes those are just like the natural, beats of a conversation that we are trying to capture. We want it to be like you're talking with your friend girls and you're having a good time. So what we do is a little bit different, from other podcasts. But I do think, making it your own, planning it, thinking about your mic, thinking about the room you're going to use, whether you're going to do, these very simple mics, which USB mic, etc. Just making sure you plan. It took us about 2 months before we actually did the first recording. So I think some of these things that, you learn as you go as well, you should also be trying to spend some time and a little bit of effort researching, so that when you do take the plunge, you're coming out with a good end product.
That's great. And also, I think something that you started doing, which you mentioned a little earlier, which I think is a really great thing, is banking up some episodes before you start releasing.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you talk about why you did that?
So yeah, I think when it came to me and my co-host, we were both very busy ladies, and I didn't realize how hard it was going to be to find one day a week that we were going to tape and we were both going to be available. So now we have settled on Tuesday nights at 10 p.m. as like the only time both of us are available to do and our podcasts have been fluctuating now. At first we tried to keep them at 30 minutes, easily went to 45, easily went over an hour. The conversation is getting so juicy. So, but yeah, so I think, preparing time, making sure you have the time commitment. For us, we said we were going to try to do a season of 10, and we're just over halfway. We're at 6. And we had to skip dates. There were dates when we had lockdown and curfews, et cetera, due to COVID-19. So we had to make adjustments, or she had a show that she had to, get some work done, or I had political debates that I was moderating, whatever it was. We really understood the importance then of, wow, I'm glad we are going to probably record the entire season. Teasing it now, we're getting ready and we're doing like some promo reels right now. To get folks, just kind of buzzing about it. But I'm glad we're doing it this way, because anything can happen, right? Where you're not going to be able to meet and you're not going to be able to record. We like doing it live. Of course, we could do it via Zoom, but it's something about the energy in the room that when we're there together, it kind of feels different. And I like the conversation that comes about when we're there in the same space. So yeah, so banking, getting a few done ahead of time. I don't want to introduce something where I'm just 2 episodes in. That's just me personally. But if I have like 7, I'm like, all right, we're going to get to 10 and we're going to finish out. And then we're probably starting a new season, maybe winter, that kind of thing for us. But definitely banking and getting some episodes under your belt would probably be a good thing.
Yeah, agreed. And that's what we do at our station. Actually, for all of our podcasts, we've banked up before we release them. And like you were saying, like it just allows for you to, take the extra time to edit. Like you don't want to have to be, like 2 days before release and something crazy happens with the story and you're like having to pivot and, you just throw it out there and, whatever. I mean, that happens, but I think that, especially if you're working on something where things are changing, I say that, but obviously if it's changing, you want it to be timely. But I guess what I mean is that you just don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're going to be, up till 4 a.m., which is something that I've done before.
We've been there.
Yeah. So yeah,
but just think about it as your brand extension. Didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, it's an extension of you and your brand. So this, professional, this journalist, you just want to make sure you're putting out content that is worthy, of being associated with you. So you don't want to slack and then you're just throwing out things out there. I'll say this, and I don't mean to throw any shade, but there are some people that have, great notoriety in our business, but their podcasts suck. Can I just say it again? Because sound quality, Maybe not so much content, but like particularly in what we just talked about, the ambient sound and echoes and over the phone. And it sounds, I was shocked by a couple people who I love, who I'm listening to their podcast, and I'm like, ooh, we got to do better. We got to do better. So again, mine isn't perfect. We'll probably never be perfect. And maybe your first few might not be either. But I, for the level of journalists that we want to be, I think it's very important that we spend the time and try at least to, you know, account for some of these easy errors that kind of come up and that we can fix ahead of time. Nope, I'm not gonna say who, but I'm just gonna keep it there.
No, I think we've all
But I like it. I like to talk about it just in a general sense. It's not meant in a kind of mean-spirited way. It's more so like, no, just think about it. Because if I'm talking about it, that means other people are too, in terms of their experience of what you put out. So be careful. Yeah. Just be mindful. Did we want to throw up the slide about possible costs associated with podcasts?
Sure.
All right. Well, and guys, again, your questions are what we're here for. Please raise your hand, throw something in the Q&A or in the chat, or afterwards we'll give you our social media handles, and you can always follow up with us or follow up with SPJ Florida, and we'd be happy to address anything that we do not address or do not have time to address today. So I received this from, it's so funny, both you and I, Lindsay, did go to a podcast consultant. There are such a thing. And if you are really intimidated by it and you really do need help kind of organizing your thinking about what should I be doing my podcast on, it's okay. So this came from someone else, again, not me. I want to give credit to this consultant. Her name is Gayon Bramwell. She and I spoke, and she has a wonderful package for getting people started. But this is just one quick, small area that we just wanted to bring out. And again, I'm not at this stage even yet when we're talking about how to post the podcast, how much that will cost. Okay, but some of the meeting and hosting, just make sure you're thinking ahead to some of the costs that are associated with it, right? So there's a media hosting fee depending on what and I think our picture is over the last, I don't know if, can we move our box, Lindsay, where it's two of us, or in the slide show?
It's not letting me.
You get what I'm saying? It's like for me, or maybe it's me. I can move it. Just kidding.
Yeah. On Facebook Live, you're not covering anything. So you're
okay, perfect. So the plugins that might come, the mics we already talked about. If you're using Zoom, you know, for guest management, of course, Zoom has a monthly fee as well. Cloud storage, Acuity, again, we're not going to go into details. You know, it depends on where you're going to host it. There are several platforms that you can use to host it as well. One of our board members is texting me just to make sure that we are covering everything. SPJ Florida will share our Zoom account with student newsrooms who may need it. Yay, SPJ Florida. So if you guys can't afford this and you are a student newsroom and maybe a monthly Zoom membership is not in your budget, we'd be happy to share ours. We're here, you know, for the community. So yes, thank you. Thank you for dropping that to us, Christiana. But yeah, so we just want you to think about it. Like I said, it's different for everyone and how you're going to manage your podcast, but there are some ongoing costs to publishing and media hosting and things like this. So just make sure, and again, we just put these names up here. We're not going to go into details. Someone else, like I said, provided this to me, but just make sure you're thinking ahead as to what it may cost. It's not completely free. You and your phone, your phone app, there's some other costs associated. All right, so just be aware. All right, do we have any final comments or questions? I know we're winding down here.
Mm-hmm. I would just say, you know, like we kind of just gave this overview of things that for me, I would want to know that are important, but reach out to us individually if you have specific questions. If you're thinking about starting a podcast and you have like a specific idea, you need help fleshing it out, you need help with like, you know, what were some of those mic suggestions, or, you know, this is my first version, like, what do you think, what, you know, whatever. I'm more than happy to help with that. I love helping people.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And she's way more experienced than I. But again, if you want someone to give it a listen, that's okay. Especially if you're like a couple episodes in, I think that would be advisable to make sure that you are not, you know, sometimes we don't hear how someone else, a third party, would hear us. So make sure, you know, you do reach out. I'm at Suzette Speaks on all social media from LinkedIn to Instagram to TikTok. So not on TikTok much. Thank you, Chinese government. All right, another conversation. But we're happy to help, guys. So if you want to, reach out, if you want to let us know, what you're thinking or what you thought of today's presentation or things that you might want to see in a future presentation as well. We didn't even get into marketing today and what to do to put yourselves out there afterward. But we just wanted to at least scratch the surface and give you some good foundational information as to what it will take and some considerations before you make this commitment. So yes, you can find me at Suzette Speaks on all platforms. Suzette Speaks at Gmail as well.
Yeah, same here. Lindsey Kilbride on Twitter. You can also just shoot me an email, lkilbride@wjct.org. And again, it's one of those things where this is kind of an overview, but really if you have an idea and you really want to just talk to me or Suzette about okay, is this a good idea? Where do I start? I'm more than happy to jump on a call and help you through it because I don't know. I think
someone helped us.
Cool. I think a lot of really good ideas and people are doing great journalism and have really unique perspectives and I would love to help you. So
yeah, podcast is the new blogging, guys. So it's easier when, especially like Lindsey, you've been covering things for years. You have content, so don't worry about it. It's just how we package it and maybe what, how we organize the episodes, etc. But I'm sure you have something very interesting others somewhere will want to hear about. So you definitely want to stay open to the idea that you might already be sitting on a podcast based on your work. Mm-hmm. And then again, if you're like me and you want to do something that is a little bit more freelance and not so connected to what you do for a living, that's also a good possibility, right? So, we just, and I love the fact that Lindsey's with the station and I'm kind of doing it on my own. As you can see, there's a broad spectrum to how this can, be completed. So don't think again that this was the end all be all. This is just scratching the surface for some of you. And then we just hope that, you've found it helpful, some of the tips helpful.
So I just wanted to show you if anyone's interested in checking out, kind of learning a little bit about what I've made. These are the podcasts that I've produced.
Yay! Go Linz!
And this is the, this right here is kind of the 2-sentence summary we did for Oddball to really draw people in and give them a taste. It was kind of complicated because it was this really weird mystery, but this is what we settled on, so.
I love it. Hold it there for a second. I'm just taking it in. I love it. But it's clean, it's simple, it gets right to the point, and it definitely is intriguing. Definitely. Yeah, and we can find any of these where? I'm sure people will want to check it out.
Yeah, you can just go to any podcast app and type them in or search WJCT and all of our podcasts will be there, or you can go to wjct.org/podcast.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything else on our slides that you feel like we can go to 8, but we can sign off if you guys feel like we've covered most of it. Any final questions, guys, please go ahead and type them. Raise your hand. I'm so glad you joined us. Again, don't forget, August 15th, the 2020 SPJ Florida Sunshine State Awards. Please do join us. If you enjoyed this, trust me, this is not as fun as it will be next week, all right? So make sure you join us. You can sign up on our website. And again, we ask that you consider becoming a member. Yay!
Well, I appreciate everyone who attended. Hopefully you got something out of it. And we're going to post this on YouTube and we'll share it after. So if you want a copy or you want to share it with anyone else, you'll be able to.
So on behalf of our president, Ms. Emily Block, and the entire SPJ Florida board, thank you for joining us. And we hope that you will be a part of some future programming. And we appreciate you, like Lindsey said, watching us. All right, Suzette Speaks. It's been a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.